Imagine stepping into a crowded alien auction house with only 2 credits left in your account. 2 children clinging to your hands and no hope left for survival. When suddenly, a chained dragon with golden eyes is brought forward, its power filling the room with fear, and every voice falls silent until you dare to whisper the unthinkable bid. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The corridors of Station Orion 5 stretched like veins through a giant steel heart, humming with the endless rhythm of recycled air and distant machinery. Merchants shouted in broken tongues, offering scraps of technology, worn-out mining drones, and cracked hover sleds. It was a place where desperate colonists came to sell the last pieces of their lives in exchange for one more cycle of survival. Mara Ellison walked among them with her shoulders squared. Though her heart trembled beneath her plain gray jumpsuit, her belly carried the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy, and 2 frightened children clung to her hands. Lena, the elder, had her lips pressed tight in defiance, while Joran stared wide-eyed at the spectacle around them. Their father had been gone only 50 days. A reactor explosion had taken his life instantly, leaving Mara with grief, 3 mouths to feed, and nothing but 2 credits in her account. She had cremated him in silence, her tears drying before the ashes cooled. There had been no time for mourning. Survival allowed no pauses. The dome where they lived was failing, its processors stuttering, its metal bones cracking under years of neglect. Without repairs, the oxygen would thin, the heat would leak, and her children would not live to see another season. Mara had come to the auction, not for pity, but for hope. Though she carried almost nothing to bargain with, inside the auction chamber, the crowd was restless. Alien traders shouted in 17 different dialects, their bids echoing across the steel arches. Mechanical drones hovered overhead, scanning the room for disputes. Mara slipped through the bodies, her children close by, ignoring the looks and whispers that followed. Human widows were not rare on Orion 5, but few walked into the auction house with only 2 credits to their name. The auctioneer, a tall being with 3 long arms and a voice that vibrated the very air, cleared his throat. The room settled. And now, honored guests, we present something different. The words carried a note of both pride and unease. Behold, a draconian telepath from the mountain skies of Kepler 442b, strong, intelligent, capable of flight and mineral detection, indentured for 6 cycles due to destruction of magistrate property. A hush fell across the chamber. From the shadows, they brought him forward. Bound by gravity restraints, the dragon-like being moved with deliberate grace. He stood taller than any creature Mara had ever seen, 12 feet at the shoulder, with wings folded tight against his body. His scales shimmered in shades of storm gray and deep blue, shifting as if alive. Horns crowned his head like carved obsidian, and his golden eyes swept across the audience with ancient intelligence. The crowd recoiled. A Regalian child began to cry, hiding behind its parents' tentacles. Merchants whispered nervously. No one stepped forward. The dragon was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too alive. Mara felt her breath catch in her throat. She had seen many strange beings on the station, but nothing like this. The creature radiated strength, and yet there was something else in his eyes. Something old, something weary, something that made her feel seen. The auctioneer waited, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "Do I hear a bid?" Silence answered him. Mara's children clung tighter, Lena tugging at her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, no." But Mara's gaze locked with the dragon's. His golden eyes did not look away. She saw no threat there, only patience and perhaps a question. Her credit reader felt heavy in her palm. She had so little left, but without a miracle, survival was impossible. Her voice cut through the stillness. 2 credits. The auctioneer blinked again, uncertain he had heard. What was that? Human female? Mara lifted her chin, her voice steady though her chest pounded. 2 credits. The room erupted in laughter and disbelief. Merchants scoffed, others whispered insults. A few moved away, muttering that the widow had lost her mind. But the dragon did not laugh. Instead, his head tilted slightly, as if studying her. In the depths of his golden gaze, a flicker appeared. Curiosity, recognition, or something more. "Sold," the auctioneer announced finally, his voice strained with both relief and mockery. "Sold for 2 credits. May the void have mercy on you." The restraints released with a heavy click. The dragon stepped forward, wings brushing the air with restrained power. The crowd parted instantly, leaving Mara and her children standing alone at the center of the hall. Joran pressed against her side, trembling, while Lena's jaw tightened in silent defiance. Mara reached for their hands, holding them tight, her eyes never leaving the dragon. And so it was done. With 2 credits, less than the cost of a meal packet, Mara Ellison had purchased a creature that could burn their world to ash. Yet in that moment, she did not feel fear. She felt the stirrings of something she had thought lost forever, since the day the reactor took her husband: hope. As they left the auction house, whispers followed, and eyes burned into their backs. But Mara did not falter. The dragon walked behind them, his steps measured, his presence overwhelming. The station seemed smaller with him there, every corridor trembling under his weight. She had no certainty of what came next. She only knew that survival had never been closer or more dangerous. And that was how the widow of Orion 5 bought a dragon for 2 credits. The journey from the auction chamber back to the family sector took hours. The mag rail hummed steadily, carrying Mara, her 2 children, and the towering dragon through the winding arteries of Station Orion 5. Passengers in nearby cars pressed against the walls, their eyes darting nervously toward the creature that followed behind Mara's small family. No words were spoken, but the air carried a weight of fear. The dragon moved slowly, his head lowered, careful not to scrape the ceiling with the crown of horns. His golden eyes flicked toward the children occasionally, but he remained silent, as if determined not to startle them further. Lena gripped her mother's hand so tightly that Mara's knuckles ached, while Joran's wide eyes never left the dragon's form. To the boy, fear and fascination twisted together into something new. When the mag rail stopped at their sector, the platform cleared instantly. Neighbors avoided even looking in their direction. Mara led her children through the narrow corridors until they reached the outer dome that served as their home. The habitat creaked with age, its metal supports scarred and weakened by years of neglect. Cracks lined the outer shell, patched with whatever scraps Mara had been able to salvage. The air inside tasted thin, and the hum of the processor sputtered like a failing heartbeat. Mara turned at the entrance, facing the dragon directly for the first time since the auction. Her heart pounded, but her voice was firm. "This is all I have. The food is simple. The walls are broken. But if you help us survive, you'll have shelter here." The dragon lowered his massive head until his golden eyes were level with hers. Then his voice filled her mind, not carried on sound, but on thought itself, deep and resonant like distant thunder. "Acceptable terms, Mara Ellison." She stumbled at the sound, clutching the wall for balance. How? How do you know my name? The dragon's eyes softened. All dragons know the names of those who show courage when others turn away. She said nothing more, leading him inside. The first days were uneasy. The children stayed close to her side, their small faces pale with distrust. Lena avoided looking at the dragon at all, while Joran could not stop sneaking glances, whispering questions to his mother that she could not answer. The dragon moved quietly through the dome, ducking his head through the narrow doors, folding his wings tightly against his body. He did not ask for comfort, nor did he demand more than what little they had. Mara gave him portions of their meals, simple grain paste and recycled water. He accepted without complaint, though the rations were barely enough for someone his size. Still, there was no anger in his gaze, only patience. On the third day, the dome processor failed completely. Alarms shrieked through the small home, warning of oxygen loss. Mara rushed to the controls, her hands shaking as she tried to restart the old system. The machine coughed once, then died, leaving only silence. Her breath caught in her throat. Without the processor, the air would thin within hours. She turned to the dragon, fear rising in her chest. Without a word, he stepped forward. Massive claws moved delicately over the broken machinery. His wings shifted as he studied the processor, golden eyes gleaming with thought. Then, with a controlled breath of fire, he melted a broken seal and reshaped the metal with precision. Sparks danced in the dim light as he fused torn circuits together, adjusting pieces with claws sharper than blades, but steady as the finest tools. Minutes later, the hum returned. The processor roared back to life, stronger than before. Air flowed again, crisp and steady. Mara sank against the wall, relief flooding her body. Lena gasped, clutching her mother. Joran's eyes widened with wonder. "He fixed it," the boy whispered. "He saved us." The dragon turned his gaze to Mara. "Your world is fragile," his mental voice said calmly, "but it can endure if given care." Days became weeks. The dragon, who Mara had learned was called Kalthar, repaired more than just the processor. He welded cracks in the dome walls, reinforced the hull patches, and even adjusted the heating system to save energy. Each task he performed with skill and precision that left Mara speechless. But what surprised her most was how he treated her children. When Joran tried to lift supply crates too heavy for his small arms, Kalthar would nudge them into place with his tail, pretending not to help so the boy could smile with pride. When Lena woke from nightmares, trembling with the memory of her father's death, she would find the dragon curled protectively outside her small R, his body shielding them from the void beyond the walls. Still, suspicion lingered. One evening, as Mara watched the dragon mend another fracture in the dome, she asked quietly, "Why do you stay? You could leave. Nothing binds you here." Kalthar paused, his golden eyes finding hers in the dim light. "Perhaps I stay because you dared when others fled. Perhaps I stay because courage is rare among your kind. Or perhaps," his voice lingered in her thoughts, heavy with meaning, "perhaps it is not chance that brought me here." Mara's chest tightened at his words, though she did not fully understand. Life in the dome was no longer filled only with fear. It was filled with questions, and every answer seemed to draw them closer to a truth she could not yet name. Weeks turned into months inside the dome. The cracks were sealed, the air processor steady, and the hum of the systems no longer a constant reminder of failure. Mara Ellison found herself watching Kalthar more closely each day. not just for the strength he brought, but for the strange familiarity that lingered in his presence. The children had changed as well. Joran followed the dragon constantly, eager to learn about the tools, the stars, and the endless stories Teal'thar seemed to carry. Lena, though still cautious, began leaving small gifts near the dragon's resting place, drawings on scraps of old paper, or pieces of polished stone she found on the trade platforms. Teal'thar accepted them with the same gravity he gave to repairing oxygen seals, bowing his head in quiet acknowledgement. Yet questions lingered. Mara could not ignore the way he looked at her sometimes, as though he carried memories she could not recall. One evening, as the children slept, Mara found Teal'thar on the observation deck. Through the transparent wall of reinforced glass, the stars stretched endlessly, scattered like ancient fire across the Black Sea. The dragon's great body seemed carved from the same darkness, his golden eyes fixed on the constellations. "You've been watching the sky every night," she said quietly, stepping beside him. "What are you searching for?" His voice filled her thoughts, deep and steady. "Not searching, remembering." She frowned, folding her arms. "Remembering what?" The dragon was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered his head until his eyes were level with hers. "I knew you before the auction." Mara felt her breath catch. "That's not possible." 20 years ago, Teal'thar continued, a young human worked in the archives of the first colony. She shared her food with a lonely dragon scholar who studied human words and songs. She gave him laughter, and she taught him kindness. She told him that courage was not about strength, but about choosing to stand when everything else falls. Mara shook her head. "I don't remember this." Teal'thar's gaze softened. "You were young. Humans burn fast. Every moment remains." Her chest tightened. Pieces of half-forgotten memories stirred at the edges of her mind. Old melodies, whispered lessons, the feeling of sharing something with a presence vast and strange, yet comforting. "That was you?" Her voice trembled. He inclined his head. "I was called Teal'thorin then. I shortened it when I returned. The wars changed everything. Dragons were no longer welcome. My ship was destroyed. It took years to crawl back from the edges of ruin. But when I heard of your loss, I made sure I would be where you needed me. That auction. It was no accident." Mara pressed her hand against the railing, her strength wavering. "You let yourself be sold? For me?" "I would have given more than 6 cycles of service," he answered. "Time means little to us. But you, humans live as fireflies do. Every spark is precious." Her throat ached as tears filled her eyes. She thought of her husband Thomas, lost in the reactor breach, of the long nights alone, of the fear of failing her children. And now this revelation, as if fate itself had woven her path with the dragons from the very beginning. "You should have told me sooner," she whispered. "I feared it would burden you," Teal'thar admitted. "You had a life, a family. I could not take that from you. I stayed in the shadows, waiting. When the time came, I chose a way to stand at your side without you needing to ask." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of the station and the endless stars beyond the glass. Mara finally spoke. "All this time, you carried the memory of me." "Not just memory," Teal'thar said. His voice in her mind trembled with weight. "It was hope. I crossed wars, silence, and exile with only one truth to guide me, that the human who once showed me kindness was still out there, and that someday I would find her again." Mara's heart raced. She thought of the children. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond survival. She felt seen. The dragon turned his gaze back to the stars. You gave me courage when I had none. Now I return it to you. Mara stood in silence, her hand brushing against the warm scales of his side. She did not speak further, but her thoughts swirled with questions. The next morning, life continued. Kael'thar worked alongside her children, teaching Joran to chart the movement of stars and guiding Lena through the simple repairs of the dome. But Mara's eyes followed him differently now, every glance heavy with the weight of what she knew. The truth had been revealed, yet the story was far from finished. Because in the shadows of Station Orion 5, whispers spread of a human widow who had bound a dragon to her service. Some saw it as foolishness, others as danger. But to Mara Ellison, it was something else entirely. It was destiny resurfaced. The seasons of the station passed slowly, though time within the dome seemed to move differently. For Mara Ellison, every day carried both the weight of survival and the quiet wonder of sharing life with a dragon. Kael'thar had become more than a presence of strength. He was protector, teacher, and something deeper that words could not yet reach. Her pregnancy advanced quickly, faster than she expected, and the stress of raising 2 children in a fragile dome wore on her body. Though she tried to hide the pain, Kael'thar always noticed. His golden eyes followed her with concern, and his voice in her mind carried calm reassurance, telling her that she was not alone. Then came the night when the station failed. A power fluctuation spread through Orion 5, plunging entire sectors into silence. Lights flickered out, oxygen pumps stalled, and the thin hum of machines vanished. Mara collapsed to her knees as pain surged through her body. The child was coming too soon, and there was no medical unit working in their sector. The children cried out, terrified, but Kael'thar moved with certainty. He lowered himself beside her, his voice steady in her thoughts. Hold on, Mara. I will not let you fall. His massive claws, sharp enough to tear steel, moved with impossible gentleness. His great body curved around her and the children, creating a shelter of warmth and protection, while the station around them groaned with failure. Hours stretched endlessly. Mara screamed and wept, her strength fading, but Kael'thar's presence held her steady. He shared his calm through the bond of thought, letting her feel his strength as if it were her own. When the child finally came into the world, it was Kael'thar who caught her, cradling the infant with care so delicate it seemed unreal. The baby's breath faltered at first, too weak for the thin air of the failing dome. Panic surged through Mara until she felt a rush of warm air sweep across the child. Kael'thar leaned close, exhaling with precise control, filling the space with heat and oxygen. The baby cried out, small but alive. Mara collapsed in exhaustion, tears spilling freely. She woke later to find herself surrounded by her children, with Kael'thar curled around them all like a living wall. The newborn slept safely in the crook of his claws, tiny and fragile against scales that had seen centuries. When she stirred, his voice whispered in her mind, "She is strong. She is perfect." Mara reached out with trembling hands, gathering the baby to her chest. "She needs a name." Kael'thar tilted his great head. "Hope, for that is what she is and what you gave me." Mara smiled through her tears. "Hope Ellison." The dragon hesitated, his golden eyes burning brighter. "Among my kind, there is another tradition. We give children of the bond a second name, one carried in the old tongue. It marks them as under our protection, part of our clan." Mara looked at him, astonished. "You would do that? You would give her your name?" "I would give it to all of you," Kael'thar replied softly. if you would have me. Life changed in the weeks that followed. The whispers on the station spread quickly. The widow who had bought a dragon for 2 credits had not only survived, but thrived. Visitors who came expecting to see a servant found instead a protector who worked beside her. They saw Joran soaring in the low-gravity arenas on Kael'thar's back, laughing with joy. They saw Lena teaching him human games, explaining rules as though he had not already mastered them. And they saw Mara, no longer bent under grief, but standing tall beside the dragon who had bound himself to her family. Time revealed something more profound than mere survival. It revealed connection. On the anniversary of the auction, a ceremony was held unlike any the station had seen. Not a wedding in the human sense, nor a dragon's bond alone, but something new. Beneath the vast dome of stars projected across the observatory, Mara stood with her children at her side. Kael'thar stood before her, his wings folded in respect, his golden eyes steady. The officiants, a human chaplain and a dragon elder, spoke words of promise. Kael'thar swore to guard and guide not just Mara, but her children and their descendants. Mara swore to share the fleeting light of human time, to remind him that every moment was precious. When the vow was complete, silence fell. Then William, the youngest of the children, raised his voice. "Does this mean he's our dad now?" Laughter rippled through the gathering, even from the stern dragon elder, whose deep chuckle shook the chamber. Kael'thar lowered his head gravely. "I would be honored to be your guardian. Perhaps the right word is stepdragon." Years passed, and the family grew into something remarkable. The dome prospered, strengthened by Kael'thar's skill and Mara's determination. Joran became a navigator among the dragons, charting paths through the stars. Lena studied alien life, inspired by the being who had once frightened her most. Hope grew up believing it was normal to have a dragon as a father, and she bridged 2 species with her gift of speaking in both words and thoughts. One night, a decade after that first auction, Mara sat with Kael'thar on the observation deck once more. The stars drifted beyond the glass, as they always had. She placed a small credit chip in his claw. 2 credits, she said softly. "The same price I paid for you." His golden eyes warmed with laughter. "The best bargain in station history." Mara shook her head, resting her hand on his scales. "No, the best was not the purchase. It was you choosing to stay. It was you choosing us." The dragon curled his tail gently around her, drawing her close. "Freedom is not wandering the void alone," he said, his voice rumbling with quiet truth. "Freedom is choosing who you fly with." And together, beneath the endless stars, Mara Ellison and Kael'thar chose each other, not as master and servant, not as human and dragon, but as family.